The best way to get better at programming is to practice. And in this example, we're going to pass an array to a function. So we're going to do some of the things that we did before, such as summing the array and generating random values, but it's all going to be through passing a function. As always, this sample file is available for download below. We'll pause for a second so you can download it, and then you can follow along. All right, so let's get started. You can see here we have some basic information from our previous example, just to give us a little bit of hints about what to do. So why don't I create some functions to handle this? So I'm going to have, for example, an init array. So I'm going to come up and create a prototype. It's going to be void init array, and then I'm going to say int and put some square brackets there. I'm also going to have a void sum array because we want to sum this up. Once again, I'm going to go int in square brackets, let it know that this is going to have an array of integers, and I'm going to do void average array. Now you'll notice that in none of these cases do I return a value. That's because C and C++ don't allow you to return an array. So how are we going to do this? Well, I'm going to come down here and create my function. I'm going to say void init array, and I'm going to have int list, and list is simply just a variable name that I'm giving it. It's a parameter name. It has no meaning. So I'm going to come up to line 30, and on line 30 through 33, I give some default values to my array. So I'm going to simply Control X and paste it into my init array. The only thing I have to change is the variable name, because here I have values, but in my parameter, I'm calling it list. The array size is a global variable. That means it's accessible to any function. Then I'm going to come over here, and after I have my int values, I'm going to init array, and I'm going to pass values. Notice that in line 38, I have to specify, hey, this is an array by putting the square brackets. But in line 30, when I call an init array, I don't have to. Now you might go, okay, fine. It makes the changes in the init array, but how does it know to update it in values? Well, arrays are passed by what we call reference. And what that means is that any changes that occur to my array inside my function are going to happen inside of wherever it was called from. So I'm going to do that. Now I'm going to come up here and create the sum array. Now I could call this list, I could call this values, I could call this array, I could call it anything I want. It does not have to be the same, but I'm just for simplicity's sake going to call this list. I'm going to do int total equals 0. This is going to be my running total for int I equals 0, I less than array size, I plus plus, total plus equals list at I. Now I have this total and I need to return it. So if I say return total, it's going to return a total. The problem is, you notice it gives an error. That's because I said void. Void is expecting it to not return anything. So I'm going to change my return type, make it an int, and then I'm going to come up here to my sum array prototype and change that also to an int. I'm going to do this also for average, except I'm going to have it as a double because it's very likely I could get a double value. So I'm going to say double average array int, and this time I'm going to call it my values, just to show you that it doesn't have to be the same. Now, if I want to average something, I find the sum of those values, I divide it by the size. Well, I already have a function that does the sum of the array. So what I'm going to do is just kind of simplify this, put it all in one line. I'm going to say return sum array. I'm going to pass in my parameter name, which is my values. This is going to go to sum array where it's going to be called list, and that's okay. It's going to return the total, and then I'm going to say divided by array size. And this is going to give me my information. I'm looking at this and going, okay, this is going to be an integer divided by an integer. Is there something I can do to make sure that I get a double value? Yes, I can do some things. So we're not going to worry about that at this time. I'm going to come up here real quick, say cout the sum of the is okay. I'm going to run this real quick. And it gives me both the sum of the array with 1,000 elements and the average of the array. If I want a different number of elements, which is going to change the sum of the array, then I can change array size, and I can make it either bigger or smaller depending upon what I'm looking for. If you notice inside the function initArray, in order to come up with some random values, we say the random modulus 512. Well, some are going to be really small, some are going to be really large. In that case, it averaged to 254, which is almost dead center of between 0 and 512. The exact middle would have been 206. And so when you had a large enough sample group, you can get pretty close to that, which is a nice thing. You also notice with the initArray, we made changes to the array inside an initArray that went back into our main function, and we got the values there. Well, what happens if I want to make sure that no values change? Well, in SumArray, as an example, I can say const. And by putting const there, we now turn this to a constant, and we're not going to let any changes occur. This means up here in my SumArray prototype, I'm also going to have to say const. And now if I go and run, it runs exactly the same. Okay, so there's no changes there. The only difference is I can't make any changes to the array elements inside of my SumArray function. If I attempt to, C++ can say, nope, you can't do that. It's a constant. So that's the way we fix that issue. Hopefully this example helped you out. If it did, please consider giving the video a like and look at the rest of the series to learn how to get better at programming C and C++.